Then we will be back tomorrow again at 11 a.m. to finish the other half of it. And then we only have one more day before we have the judge's verdict or decision, and then sentencing next month. I believe sentencing is next month. So I am planning on covering his parents' case. Now, his parents, I'd have to look up the charges again, but they're charged as, I think, accessories because they purchased the pew pew for him at the age of 15, and they also ran and emptied out his bank account to go on the run. They found him in Detroit, a couple blocks from the international border. So I will be covering that. I will not be doing it in the live format like this. I will do it as a recording. They have a bunch of different hearings, so that will be down the road. I have another case that I want to cover, and it's Megan, and I would have to watch it again. I am not sure how to pronounce her last name, but it is known as a sleeping dad trial, or sleeping dad murder. And she is also from Michigan, but she was found not guilty, and she didn't have a Miller hearing, and she was 18. And the controversy for me is the judge said that she was not, I don't know. Anyways, the two cases are handled very differently, so I want to take a look at that case as well. With that, let's start day 3 of Ethan Crumbley's hearing. Luna.
All rise. Oakland County Circuit Court is now in session with the Honorable Kwame Rowe presiding.
Thank you. Good morning. You may all be seated.
Sorry, guys. There we go. Oh, why did it stop?
Your Honor, Klein People versus Ethan Crumbley, case number 279506FC.
Thank you and good morning. Counsel appearances for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Karen McDonald on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Mark Case on behalf of the people. Good morning, Your Honor. David Williams on behalf of the people.
Paulette Michelle Lofton on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Thank you so much. I greatly, greatly appreciate hearing that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning to all counsel. You may all be seated. Defense ready to proceed with your next witness?
Yes, if I could just have a moment to connect the PowerPoint, please.
Absolutely.
I think we should be good. Defense will call Dr. Colin King to the stand.
Thank you. Doctor, you're going to approach the witness stand. You're going to stand in the witness box, faced by clerk to be sworn, please.
Please raise your hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm the statements you're about to make to this court will be the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. If you could, please state your full name for the record and spell your last name.
Sure. My name is Colin King. C is in Charlie. Olin. Last name King. King.
Thank you. Defense your witness.
Thank you. Dr. King, I'll let you get situated. Let me know when you're ready.
Thank you.
set?
I am ready.
Okay. Doctor, what is your highest qualification for education?
I have a PhD in counseling psychology
And where did you obtain your degree?
from Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan.
What licenses do you hold?
I am a fully licensed psychologist, and I'm also licensed as a professional counselor, so I'm dually licensed.
What certifications do you have?
So I'm certified as a board forensic counselor, a board certified sentence mitigation specialist, a certified advanced addiction specialist.
Have you ever had your license revoked or suspended?
No, ma'am.
Where did you do your internship?
So I did my internship in Michigan City, Indiana, and that's at a psychiatric hospital that treats children, adolescents, and adults. And then I did a second internship at Southwest Detroit Community Mental Health, working with patients with chronic mental health issues and poly substance abuse.
Just for the record, it appears the witness is consulting some documents. Can we just identify what those are?
Thank you, sir. What do you have that's currently with you on the witness stand?
Sure, I submitted a copy of my CV.
Thank you. And is that what you're referring to?
Yes, yes.
People, do you have a copy of the CV?
Yes, Your Honor. He's got a whole binder. I just want to make sure I understand what he's consulting.
Yeah, I can absolutely tell you what is in my binder, sir.
Sure. There's no need, sir. If you could please set the binder aside and let's specifically ask to refer to it.
Okay.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Absolutely. Your resume indicates that you also lectured at a number of universities. Can you describe that?
Yes, so as an adjunct professor, I've lectured at Wayne State, Eastern Michigan University, Ashland University, and University of Detroit Mercy.
And what courses did you teach there?
I taught classes in multicultural issues and psychological testing.
You also worked as a special education consultant, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what did you do there?
I consult with one of the charter schools in Michigan, doing IEPs and psychological testing.
You also have listed that you are a brain injury expert. Can you tell me about your experience treating brain injury and or mental illness?
Absolutely. So I've worked with a large Midwestern brain injury facility, actually one of the largest in Michigan. And over the last maybe 23 years or so, I have treated various forms of brain injuries, mental illness, and patients with poly substance abuse. In fact, I was tasked as a part of my assignments, tasked with supervising teams of occupational therapists, physical therapists, nurses, and psychologists. I've traveled to different states and met with neurologists and assessed patients who were injured due to maybe auto accident or spinal cord injury or stroke. Had an opportunity to look at their medical records and review their records with physicians, and then returned back to Michigan and set up treatment programs for them. I also traveled to Loma Linda University, which is one of the largest, which has one of the largest cadaver labs in the nation, and had an opportunity to meet with a neuropathologist and got a chance to look at various models of the brain, to handle the brain and to see how it works. I've also attended various lectures at the Amen clinics, and you may know he's the award winner on Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. I actually had my own brain scanned, and so that gives me my experience in brain injury.
Have you ever testified at any juvenile life cases before?
I have.
Okay, I wanted to stop real quick to let you guys know. He says polysubstance, and you may possibly hear the term polypharmacology, and all that means is many. Poly means many. So he's talking about people that are on many substances, and I think he's using the term substance, so it's not it could be anything, whether legal or illegal. But I just wanted to clarify. That's what he means when he's saying polyfarm or polysubstance.
Have
In what counties?
Wayne, Macomb, Genesee, and I think Jackson.
In the last 3 years, approximately how many juvenile lifers, homicide, or competency cases have you testified in?
Probably about 24, 25.
Have you been previously qualified as an expert?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to have Dr. Colin King as an expert in mental health, forensic psychology, and brain injury.
Judge, I understand he's interviewed, I'm sorry, may I, Judge?
Yes.
I understand that he's interviewed the defendant and he's here as a mitigation specialist, and I don't have any issue with that. There's nothing in his report or in the record to indicate that this defendant had any kind of brain injury. So I would object to his qualification on that simply because it's not relevant to this proceeding.
Thank you. As it relates to any brain injury, unless there's going to be foundation laid that this defendant has brain injury, then that's not appropriate. However, I will qualify this witness as an expert in mental health and forensic psychology. Is that correct?
That is correct.
He is so qualified.
Thank you.
I'm actually honestly super impressed by this guy's qualifications. Like, let's see what he has to say though.
And Your Honor, we do have a demonstrative PowerPoint to explain his report. If you want to just move to the next slide. All right, so I want to go over the process that was taken. Is it working? Oh yeah, just move to the next one. So let's start with the process. It is my understanding that you became involved in this case in December of 2022. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
All right. And can you tell me what you did first?
So I spent approximately 23 to 24 hours testing Ethan Crumbley over about 6 sessions. And I used about 15 different assessments, and I've turned in my report, which is about a 6 to 9 to 7 page report.
That's fairly
Some of the testing, was
intense
it done
testing.
in person?
Yes, ma'am.
And then some of the testing, was it done on computer or by Zoom?
It was done virtually. Yes, ma'am.
So you interviewed him multiple times, approximately 1 year after the incident, a little bit longer than 1 year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Were you also given a litany of records, videos, text messages, and reports to review?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you then do research to gather data and establish the standards that are required?
I did.
Here we also have that you consulted with a Dr. Malcolm Court, that is a sociologist. Why is it important to peer review?
Well, because I wanted a different discipline to look at my work and to provide me feedback on my work. I wanted to make sure that it was not just my personal opinion, but that my work was based on testing and solid scientific evidence.
And Your Honor, I'll draw your attention to Exhibit O, the CV of Dr. Malcolm Court, and Exhibit P, the report of Dr. Malcolm Court, which reviews Dr. King's findings.
Thank you.
You want to move to the next one?
Judge, if I may, I would be stipulated the admission of exhibits with the understanding Dr. Court was a witness. And so I had some questions for Dr. Court, and now what it sounds like is he's not going to testify. So I have an issue with the court using his report as a basis, as evidence in this case, without the chance to cross-examine.
So Dr. Court was not listed on my witness list. I did have conversations with Mr. Keese, the fact that Mr. Court would not be called. This should not be a surprise at all. And they did not object to my exhibits.
Okay. Judge, I'll do it as to weight of the evidence to the court to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. The court will apply the appropriate weight, noting that the doctor will not be testifying.
Thank you. So as a brief overview, what is it that you looked at in regards to this case to form an opinion.
Sure. So I looked at Ethan's early life. I looked at the
I don't understand that
parental
picture.
influences and activities. I looked at the Oxford school system, testing results, events leading up to the shooting.
Hold on. What is with the picture of two seagulls sitting on a light, like street light or parking lot light? That is completely irrelevant to everything. This is like some third grade PowerPoint presentation. Come on, people.
The shooting, the day of shooting, and a review of mental illness.
I'll move to the next one. All right, so let's talk about early childhood experiences. Can you discuss that?
Again, with the picture.
Absolutely.
So basic.
Bernie, he's consulting
He has the
something.
PowerPoint.
Okay, it's simply the PowerPoint.
Yeah, this is sir. This is an exact copy.
Let me step in. Anytime you're referring to something on the witness stand, the parties need to be aware of what you're looking at. And so you just can't just pick something up and start reviewing it. First, the defense attorney or the prosecutor has to prompt you to look at something. So what are you currently looking at, sir?
I have an exact copy of the PowerPoint that is on the screen, sir.
Thank you. And that's the only thing that you're looking at right now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you. All right, so let's start again. Early childhood experiences. What did you come across when examining all of the evidence and discussing the matter with Mr. Crumbley?
Certainly, in my review of the records, I saw that as early as age 10, matter of fact, even going back to age 6, there were some issues. I interviewed a neighbor, and looking at the records, which were corroborated, is that he was left unattended as early as age 6. He would go across to the neighbor's house, especially when there was like a thunder shower, and reported that he was afraid and would ask for help. And they would ask him where were his parents, and his response was, "I don't know." In the records, at age 10, there's text messages between Ethan and his mom saying to her, "When are you going to come home?" And there were no responses. In my interview with Ethan, he explained that he spent countless hours watching various adult games. Some of them are in my report, and Assassin's Creed, Grand Theft Auto, and he also spent an inordinate amount of time going to different websites and indulging in various graphic scenes, and indicated after a while he began to fantasize about being part of those scenes. So he sort of lost track of reality.
You also have listed trauma. What is trauma?
Trauma is sort of an insult to the person, an insult to the brain. So it could be as a result of parental discord. It could be as a result of high levels of anxiety or high levels of depression. Anything that insults the person's brain can be classified as trauma.
What about constant stress from parents fighting?
Yes, parental dysfunction, constant and intense dysfunction, can induce trauma. In my interview with Ethan and in a review of the records also, there's frequent references to either parent threatening to commit suicide. And on some occasions, Ethan has had to be the one intervening at such a young age.
What about the loss of a grandparent or the loss of an animal, especially in a violent death?
Absolutely. Ethan disclosed that one of his sort of soulmate was a large dog that he had cherished, and It died at home, and he was the one tasked with having to remove it and take it back to the shed and figure out how to dispose of it.
And you
Yeah,
saw
that's
the
messed
Google
up.
searches where he actually is looking how to dispose of a dog that has passed away. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
What about the loss of a best friend?
The loss of a best friend and perhaps your only friend could be a pretty traumatic experience, as in the case of Ethan, and as seen in the record, he spent hours and hours communicating with his best friend and pouring out his heart and disclosing what was happening to him.
Were you also told what his mother told him when that friend went away to a rehab?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that?
She told him that he would probably never see his friend again.
All right, let's move on. Dr. Keating, when he testified last week, touched on ACEs. Can you explain what that is to the court?
Yes, so I think in 1995 and 97, my year could be off, the CDC and Kaiser commissioned a study where they looked at 17,000 people, and they have established what is called ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences. And what the researchers saw was that between the ages of 0 to 18, children exposed to abuse, physical or emotional, mental, parental dysfunction, or incarceration, the more ACEs someone has, the more likely they are to have mental health issues. In fact, what the researchers discovered is that with 6 or more ACEs, the probability of that person dying 20 years earlier than their peer is greatly improved.
Okay. And were you able to find a number of these factors when you interviewed Ethan as well as reviewed the records?
Yes, ma'am.
In a number of our conversations, you had discussed a feral child. What is a feral child?
So a feral child, and I would love to read the definition if I can.
If you can give us the definition, that would be fine.
Certainly. It's essentially a child who has been abandoned. Initially, this phenomenon was known as someone who is abandoned physically. But then there is an emotional and a psychological construct to it. So what the researchers saw is that someone who is abandoned has what is called arrested development. Hence, they lack social skills, they lack social awareness, they lack social cues, and essentially become misfits in society.
It
And
doesn't mean
why
they
do you
turn
feel
into
that this is
killers.
relevant in your review of this case?
So when I interviewed Ethan and just looked at his profile, at his high level of isolation, lack of parental support, lack of guidance, lack of resources. So psychologically and socially, he can be considered a feral child.
Let's move on. You also had the opportunity to review some text messages between Ethan's parents, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, just for your notes, it is Exhibit F.
Thank you.
I apologize, Exhibit G. And in those text messages, were you able to see where they were discussing situations that Ethan was going through as early as March or even October of 2020?
Yes.
And what did those text messages show you?
So, very clear indication that his parents were not in tune to what was going on with him. In this string of text messages, he actually woke up in their room one day and the mom and dad was they were exchanging text messages, and they were sort of joking that Ethan was asking, "What am I doing in you guys' role?" And one of the text messages stated that he seemed to be under the influence of substances. And one parent asked the other, "Did you give him one of your Xanax?" And she said, "No, melatonin."
So do those text messages show that Ethan was experiencing things that his parents at least were observing at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's move to part 2, which is the parental influences and activities. I know that we touched on things that Ethan reported, the threats of suicide made in front of Ethan. What else did you find that was interesting under this section?
So under this section, Ethan witnessed just a litany of verbal abuse, frequent taunts, and I guess the part that sort of stood out for me was when he told his parents that he was hearing voices and he needed to see a therapist. I don't know what 50-year-old raises his hand and says, "My brain hurts, I need to see a therapist." And it never happened.
What did you find out about the purchase of the gun and then going to the shooting range?
So there seemed to have been discord between his parents. I think his dad bought the gun out of spite, and then his mom took him to the shooting range out of spite because they were arguing. So there was constant just discord and family dysfunction.
And in your interview with Ethan, did he report that he was ever taken to any sort of doctor to deal with this?
In my review of the record, there was no indication that he was ever taken to a doctor.
In your interviews and your discussion with him about the constant situations that were going on, was there constant arguments about divorce and which parent that Ethan would choose?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit?
So yes, there was frequent just harsh discussions about infidelity, suicide, and which parent Ethan needed to choose to live with when they separate or the event that they separate.
Were you able to look at the text messages between Ethan and his friend over the months leading up to November?
I did.
All right. And what's the significance that you found with those text messages?
So in reviewing those text messages, let me just say, Ethan had no idea that these text messages were going to be made public. And so he was having private conversations with his friend. And in one of his text messages, which is on the screen, he says that my mom thinks I'm taking drugs, but she doesn't worry about my mental health. In another of the text messages on the screen, he said, I have an effing breakdown in the shower. And in the text messages also, he said, from what my mom said last night, I went outside in my shorts and I have no recollection of that event. And in another text message on your screen, he said to his friend, I am hallucinating. And he said, I hear like people talking to me. These were actual text messages back and forth between himself and his friend.
I want to move next to part 3, which is the Oxford school system. Were you able to take a look at the
Finally,
counseling
a
that was
relevant picture.
available to Ethan at the school, as well as the reports surrounding the school's interaction with Ethan the day prior and the day of the incident?
Can you repeat that question? please?
Sure. Were you able to look at Oxford school system and their counseling program, as well as the interaction that the school system had with him the day before, as well as the day of the incident?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And can you explain what you found?
So what I found was that in terms of the available resources for intervention, it did not appear to me from my review of the information that he was afforded any type of mental health assistance.
Okay. I'm gonna move to the next one. All right. You also mentioned in your report implicit bias. What is that?
So implicit bias it's sort of like the unconscious forces. You know, I can use an analogy of a peanut butter jar, which is actually on one of their slides. And so a child learns how to use peanut butter from a jar because the child is taught by the parent how to do that. They learn how to unscrew and cork and unscrew the peanut butter jar to get peanut from their peanut butter. So after a while, they learn it so well that they're able to do it unconsciously. The grooves on that bottle represent the grooves that society grooves us with, so that we have certain perception of things and people. Well, that's how implicit bias works. Let me give you another quick example. I was in court in Detroit and about to step into the elevator, and there was an attorney and other people. I was dressed in suit and tie, and the attorney turned to me and said, "Counsel, come on in." I'm not an attorney, but he made the assumption based on how I was dressed and how I comported myself that I was an attorney. Well, that's how implicit bias works. So it's not necessarily a bad thing nor a good thing. It's a thing, but it can have deadly consequences if it's not used appropriately.
Okay. Now, you also stated that you had a chance to look at the resources that were available to any high school student at Oxford High School. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And is there a rubric or is there a standard that is required for a school to have counselors, to have support staff, or to be able to help the students when they have issues?
Certainly. So the American School Counseling Association, known as ASCA, this is sort of like the monitoring body that makes recommendation in terms of social worker to student ratio. So the recommendation is that there be minimum one social worker to about 250 students. And what that body says is that if you have a ratio of one social worker to 1,000 students, you are not even getting into the classroom.
Were you able to find the data, and I know that it's contained in your report, regarding Oxford in the year prior and the year of the incident?
Certainly.
Okay. And Your Honor, just because they're numbers, I ask if it's okay that he refer to his notes just to get the numbers correct.
Do you need objection?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may, sir.
So in the 2019-2020 school year, what was the social worker to student ratio in Oxford?
So it was approximately one social worker to about 1,000 students.
What about 2020 to 2021?
It was one social worker to about 900 students.
And then what about 2021 to 2022?
It was about one to about 900 students.
So you went even a step further to look at suspensions and expulsions. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
So in my research in the Oxford school system, just in terms of raw data, I saw that whites comprised about 80% of the school district's enrollment, and blacks comprise, I think, about just under 5%, and Hispanics about 12%, which is reflective, I believe, of the society. So there was nothing revealing about that. However, when you begin now to disaggregate the data, because data tells you something, so that when you begin to disaggregate it, you see a pattern, which is visible on your screen. So whites, 80% enrollment, and in terms of suspensions, 68% of the students suspended were whites. Blacks, enrollment, 5%. Suspension, 12%. Let's look at expulsions.
Mhm.
Again, whites, 80% of the population. Expulsions, 44%, so about half. Blacks, 5% of the population. Expulsions, 22%. Hispanics, think about 12% of the population. Expulsions, 22%. What this data is telling you is very significant, is that other students are suspended or expelled at a disproportionate rate when considered to the majority population. And then when you dig a little deeper, you have to ask yourself, what are we missing? And as it pertains to Ethan, as you will see, is that the students are not subject to the same degree of rigor, which is why implicit bias is so important.
Okay. And can you explain, just so it's clear, how implicit bias ties into these findings?
Absolutely, because if you believe,
So essentially, Ethan Crumbley's white. So now he's saying it's like a reverse racism, that he wasn't, because white or blacks and Hispanics have a higher rate of suspension than white students, so therefore he was overlooked. I don't know what to say to that. That's a very interesting take on this situation, because I was about to ask what this has to do with Ethan Crumbley because he's white, but I'm not sure I've ever heard this take on, or a theory from this aspect. What do you guys think? I'm kind of perplexed by this. As someone that looks white, this is like perplexing. Granted, I went to a school that was like 99% white, but I've never heard this before. Oh, and the white students were disproportionately suspended over black and Hispanic students. Just because that's not that we had many people get suspended. I've never heard that take on it. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? That is so strange
that a student
to me.
is not a problem, you are less likely to pay attention to that student. Even if you are shown overwhelming evidence about problems, implicit bias says you give this person a pass because that's how you've been groomed. You make certain assumptions. So you give certain people a pass based on your assumptions. However, if you give a person a pass who is a problem, it creates a bigger issue.
Okay. So I want to go into
I can
a little
I
bit
can
of
understand
what you
that.
call a pass. You were shown a number of assignments
oof.
that were found in Ethan's backpack, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my
And
problem
you
here.
would agree with me
Hold on.
that
My problem is they were found in his backpack, meaning they had not been turned in. So how can anyone be held responsible? Because they even said that there was someone earlier that testified that a teacher went back and looked, like the day of the shooting, went back and looked at stuff he had turned in, and she could see where he had erased a drawing of a pew-pew, but left like the stick figure drawing or whatever, the drawing of the person. So he's obviously correcting those obvious glaring things. I don't like this. I don't like this.
and Your Honor, we're
She's
these exhibits can
shifting
be
the
found in
blame, or
Exhibit
trying to
C.
shift the blame. They were in his
There
backpack.
is
They were not turned in.
a number of pieces of paper with guns, with bullets, and other alarming scenes drawn on them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
But they were in
The
his
prosecutor
backpack.
made mention that we aren't 100% certain that these were seen by teachers, but they were
Yeah.
in his backpack and are school assignments, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So they were in his pack. No one else seen them. Duh.
Were you
Ugh.
also able to look at emails between the teachers the day before this incident as well as the day of the incident, discussing the things that had come to light from the teachers, trying to give warning to the people in the office?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Your Honor, that's also found in Exhibit C.
Thank you.
And what did those emails show to you, or how do they tie into implicit bias?
So just looking at the emails, I was just read.
Okay, she's talking about implicit bias. Here's the problem. Statistically, school shooters are white. So I don't think implicit bias necessarily pertains here. White, loner, teenage boys. Those are school shooters. Everything he is. So she's literally trying to shift blame and responsibility away from Ethan when he literally checks off statistically what we see. So no.
Just red flags went up. One teacher said, and it's on there.
I think it was too late. It happened too late.
And this is from Miss Kropinski. She said, "I know Jackie emailed you guys yesterday.
Exactly
with
this.
some concerns about Ethan Crumbley in our first hour class.
This is reaching, Robin.
Today, he's
This is
watching videos on his
hardcore
phone
reaching.
on a guy gunning down people. It looks like it's a movie scene and not security footage, a real event, but definitely still concerning when taking into account some of his behaviors." I continue. And this is from Ms. Kubini. "I had a student doing first hour, Ethan Crumbley, who was on his phone looking at different bullets at the end of first hour today. As I was walking around the room passing out their essays, I didn't get a chance to investigate it a bit further since it was at the end of the hour. Now that he's on my radar, I'm also noticing that some of his previous work that he completed from early in the year lean a bit toward the violent side. I can bring these things later today doing my 5th prep hour.
And we can tell the time on that email is 9:33 a.m., correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it certainly
The
sounds like they're trying to say the
assignment,
school's
that
at
Ms.
fault
Kubina
here.
is talking about, you had a chance to look at, and it's contained as well in my exhibit. It's a note card where a gun was erased, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
it was erased.
there is also a drawing of a person with an arm outstretched with the gun, correct?
That is correct.
But the gun was erased. So,
So I want to
it
get
wasn't
into
visible.
the brain and mental illness. You can go to the next one. What is mental illness?
So it's a substantial disorder of thought or mood that's
Here we go. More blame shifting.
Judgment, behavior, and the capacity to recognize reality. Mental illness is actually a symptom of a deeper problem. So, for example, if someone has a chest pain is a symptom of a deeper problem. It could be a pulled muscle, or it could be because of a heart attack. So mental illness is a sign of brain dis-ease.
Correct. He explained that really well, actually.
So there are multiple ways to study the brain. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you briefly discuss those different ways?
Certainly. So one way is to look.
Have a
at
good
the
day,
brain
Robin. Thanks for
directly.
stopping by.
So cardiologists look at the heart, dentists look at the teeth, and mental health people should look directly at the brain through various brain imaging techniques which are available. So that's one way. A second way is you want to test the brain directly through psychological instruments. Then a third way is what is utilized by psychiatrists and psychologists, and that is they use symptom clusters. So, for example, if someone comes to me and they say, for the last month or so, I've not been sleeping well, I've not been eating well, I've been skipping out on work, I've been crying, I've been sad and blue, then I go to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, and I look at symptoms. And if the person has, for example, 5 of these 8 symptoms, then I can diagnose that person like with major depressive disorder. So that's the third way of looking at the brain. And then the last one really is not appropriate, and that is that you guess. So what you do, you say, well, because I see you acting in this way, and because you can plan, and because you can execute, and because you can do these things, I know that you're not ill or don't have a brain dysfunction. That is guessing.
So were you able to actually look at Ethan's brain directly through imaging?
I was not able to.
Okay. So did you then decide to test the brain using assessment tools and perform a number of testing?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. We'll go to the next one. Can you explain to us the brain and exactly how easy it is for the brain to be damaged in a variety of ways?
Absolutely. So
Judge, I'd like some foundation for this area. There's just no evidence in the record that this defendant suffered any brain damage.
Thank you. Please lay more foundation.
Absolutely. Were you able to view a video taken at the 5-1 diner?
yes, I did.
Okay. And in that video, actually, we'll go ahead and play it now
So
since
what
it's
I would like to
Sure.
emphasize.
1 second. She has to ask a question. I can't interrupt.
sure. So were you able to, in your discussions with Ethan and the evidence that you were presented, were you able to, or did you have some concern that an injury to the brain could have occurred based on what he reported as a child and what you saw in this video?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. let's go ahead and play the video. This is my Exhibit R. There is no sound in this video.
If you go back to last Thursday, I think I played it Thursday a couple of times. It's bad. He biffed and hit his head hard.
So this is from 2020. What did you observe on this video?
So I observed Ethan walking in the diner, and for some inexplicable reason, his head takes a direct hit to the floor, and observed him trying to get up on his own volition, but he was not able to. And as we know, the brain is very soft. It has the consistency of soft butter or raw egg, and it's housed in this very hard box called the skull that has very sharp ridges. The brain is very susceptible to injury, and I love to do a demonstration with your permission.
Sure, Your Honor, he has a demonstration to show with an egg, as he described, how exactly, how soft the brain is and how little it takes to injure the brain. Would the court allow? Hold on.
Second. I'm sorry, someone was just approaching
Yes,
without asking permission. I'm sorry, what exactly are you trying to do?
Yes, Your Honor. My witness would like to demonstrate to the court how easy it is, as he described, the brain is like a raw egg inside of the skull. He would like to demonstrate to the court how easy it is, even a fall like this, to damage the inside of the brain.
People with the objection?
Judge, I guess I just wonder what the basis of that testimony is. It sounds like it's just Dr. King telling us, and the idea that it's the consistency of an egg. I see it in his report without citing anything. So like some foundation that this is not just Dr. King's theory.
Thank you. Respectfully, your argument goes to the weight of this demonstrative evidence, and so the court will apply the appropriate weight. You may approach the witness.
And can you demonstrate, since obviously this is a video courtroom and we're recording, can you demonstrate or discuss what you're going to demonstrate?
Absolutely. So as I previously mentioned,
So you can be seated because I can't see what you're doing.
my apologies, Your Honor. So as I mentioned, it's 100 billion neurons and 1 trillion connections in the brain. And this is scientific evidence. This is not my opinion. This is how the human brain is engineered. And it has the consistency of soft butter or raw egg. I've had the opportunity to visit the lab in Loma Linda. I've handled the human brain, and I've seen how the human brain works and how it looks like. It has the consistency of an egg. Ethan is about
I've handled the
6 feet,
human
2
brain
inches
as well.
and this is not 6 feet 2 inches. This probably is about, I don't know, 2 feet.
Before you move on, sir, please do not. Are you going to drop this egg in the courtroom? Thank you. I can't see.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you. You may proceed, sir.
Now, it makes it difficult for me if I don't stand, Your Honor.
Thank you. You can stand now. I just can't see over this bar here, so I can't see what's below your chest area. So you may stand so that way I can see what you're doing, sir.
So Ethan is 6 feet 2, and this is less than 2 feet. That's the human brain. The reason why our brains don't collapse when we have an injury
Okay, Bill Nye the Science
is
Guy.
because the brain is housed in this hard shell called the skull. This skull protects the brain from external injuries.
So besides the incident that we saw at the 5-1 diner, did he also make you aware of other circumstances where he hit his head or even blacked out?
Yes.
Can you describe that?
Yeah, Ethan disclosed that he was out with his parents. I think they were picking strawberries or doing something like that. And he fell, and all he remembered was coming to, was regaining consciousness. And he asked his parents what happened, and they said that he had taken a blow to the head. And there is no indication that he was taken to the emergency room or received medical assistance.
In regards to the 5-1 diner video, you were shown a report where the owner was interviewed, and in fact, his parents told the owner to not call 911 after that fall. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that is correct.
And in your interview with Ethan, did he ever tell you that at some point following that he was taken to the hospital or taken to the doctor to see, one, why he fell, or two, what happened from the fall?
I saw no evidence of that.
Let's move on. Let's go through a couple of these more quickly. Let's go to part 4. So keep clicking. We're going to move along to part 4, which is Ethan's testing. Can you explain to the court the tests that you performed with Ethan?
Certainly. So I performed 15 different types of tests. And I wanted to, because there was an opportunity to image his brain. So I wanted to test his brain to see what his brain is like. And so there are a list of 15 tests here on the screen in my report.
Okay, let's go through them. The evaluation of competency to stand trial. Why was this important?
It was important because this is a test that is affirmed by that is recognized, I should say, by the U.S. Supreme Court in Dusky versus the people in 1960. And it essentially looks at 3 things. Does the person have the ability to consult with their attorney? Does the person have the ability to rationally understand the proceedings of the court? Does the person have a factual understanding of the proceedings of the court? And the reason why I administer this test is because I know that sometimes inmates feign or they fake. They try to pretend that something is going on when that is not the case. So when I administer this test, anything below 60 is normal, indicating that Ethan approached this test in an honest and open manner. In other words, he was not feigning. He didn't know the questions that pertain to feigning.
Okay. And what were the results?
He does have the ability to consult with his attorney. He does understand the charges against him, and he does have a factual understanding of the charges.
Okay, let's move on to the next test, the mini mental status examination. What is that?
It's a test that has essentially 30 questions, and it tests the person's orientation. My reason for administering this is, again, this is one of the instruments that if someone wants to feign or fake, they can easily do that. For example, some of the questions are, what is the date? What is the date? Where are you? And Ethan answered all of those questions, indicating on that day that he was oriented times 3.
Let's move to the next one. You did a survey of stress symptoms. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you explain your findings?
So on this instrument, on the survey of stress symptoms, Ethan scored 39, indicating high levels of stress. And it was very clear to me that he was approaching it in a very honest, test-taking manner.
And can you describe some of the symptoms that this test addresses?
Certainly. Anxiety, depression, feeling overwhelmed, loneliness, intrusive thoughts, fatigue. All of those are elements that are present in this test that he endorsed.
Okay. Let's move to the next one, post-traumatic stress checklist for DSM-5. Can you explain what that is?
Sure, it's an instrument that is based on the DSM-5, which is the golden standard of diagnosing mental illness. And so his score of 57 places him in a very high stress category, that meets their DSM criteria.
You then did the Beck Depression Inventory. Can you explain that to the court?
Sure, it's an
Here's the thing. If you started testing like everybody, you're going to see that a lot more people have mental illness and have like high stress levels or come from high conflict homes. You're going to see that if you start testing people. They say if you were to take just any person off the street, any average American, and start running a litany of tests, you're going to find at least 5 to 7 chronic health issues that they have. So, yeah, when you start testing, you are going to find stuff. And I don't think anyone's denying that he didn't have a crappy childhood or that, you know, he straight up said in his journal that if he hadn't come up with this plan to shoot up the school, he was going to be a serial killer. We know that he's got the signs of psychopathy, the whole abusing animals and the watching violent content and he made a plan, wrote out in the journal, raping a fellow female student and torturing her and I think possibly killing her. Like, okay, those are the classic hallmarks of psychopathy. That doesn't mean that he's mentally ill. And even if he's mentally ill, it doesn't excuse what he did. And it sounds to me like they're trying to say, oh, because he had these things, that's why he did this. I don't care. He knew what he was doing, and he knew what he was doing was wrong, and he didn't care. So, yeah, he was 15. Is his brain fully developed? No, but guess what? There are millions and billions of us that have these same issues, not necessarily the psychopathy, but, you know, come from abuse and trauma and all that kind of stuff. And I help people. At 18, well, actually at 15, I was the student athletic trainer. At 18, I was an EMT. So no, she needs to stop. She's blame shifting and it gets,
It's an instrument that assesses for depression, sadness,
and also this testing was done a year after he's been in jail. Of course he's going to have depression.
29, which is on the higher level, indicating very high levels of depression.
And again, you're performing these testings at least a year after he has become incarcerated, correct?
That is correct.
Let's look at the next one. It's the Burns Anxiety Inventory. Can you explain to the court what that is?
So that is a measure of one's anxiety, how anxious you are as a person. And as we know, anxiety has a direct effect on the brain. Ethan's score is 53, which is actually in the highest classification of anxiety.
Again, he's in
And
jail.
does that finding
and
of high
basically
anxiety
isolation.
fit into all of the other evidence you were looking at? The journal, the text messaging between his friend, and what he self-reported to you?
That is correct.
Let's now look at the brief psychiatric rating scale. Can you explain what that is to the court and what your findings were?
Yeah, so this instrument looks at psychosis. And what is psychosis? Psychosis is
Not psychosis, psychopathy. He's not psychotic. He's a psychopath.
Auditory.
There's a difference.
And visual delusions. And he endorsed several of those items, indicating the presence of psychosis.
Okay. Let's now look at the Kaufman Brief Intelligent Test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
Yes, the Kaufman Brief Intelligence Test is administered to test someone's level of intellectual functioning. The reason why I administered this instrument is I wanted to find out why was he failing in school. In my testing, if you have an intelligent person who's failing in the classroom, it's a signal that there is something going on. And when I administered this test, I saw that his verbal IQ was 104. So average, anything above 85 to about 100, 110 falls in the average range. So he has average verbal IQ, average nonverbal IQ, and overall average intelligence.
You then went on to perform the wide range achievement test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
Certainly, in the state of Michigan for special education testing, we administer the intelligence test and 2 achievement tests. So I administered a wide range achievement test just to see if I missed anything in terms of his ability to function in their classroom. And except for math, most of his scores were average to high average. Again, that's how we know that there's something else going on with someone who has average intelligence.
Let's move on to the Weschler Individual Achievement Test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
So that
To be
is
fair, I don't math either, so.
Test, the RAP, and the WIAT. Again, it's just to sort of double check your results. And again, the scores are consistent with someone who has the ability academically to function in the classroom, but wasn't.
Then finally, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. What is that and what were your results?
So that is, the MMPI is for, this one is for adolescents. It's regarded as the dean of tests to determine mental illness. This test has been validated across various measures, and it's a test that psychologists use. On the table to the left, that is his PSY score. His score is 81. Anything over 60 means that the person has a number of those symptoms
Of mental illness.
of mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
So his score is 81, indicating someone who has high degrees of paranoia and hallucinations. And then on the right, which is even more troubling, the table on the right, he has elevations above 60 in 2 key measures. One is OCD, obsessive compulsive, and anxiety. And I would love to explain what I mean by that.
If you could explain obsessive compulsive to the court.
So there's a part of the brain called the cingulate gyrus. It runs from the front of the brain to the back of the brain. That is the brain gear shifter. It allows us to shift from one thing to the next. In Ethan's case, someone who scores highly on this measure, what it tells me that this person does not have the ability to shut off those thoughts. It's like being stuck on. So you're with these thoughts every single day, every single night. And we see that with people who have OCD. He also has very high levels of anxiety, and those two tend to hang together. And as you notice in his journal, you notice that repetition, that the voices don't stop. My brain is on fire. Well, when I tested his brain, it's very consistent with what he was writing.
Okay. Does the obsessive compulsive disorder explain the constant searches on internet to look at violent things or to research things or any type of preparation and planning?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's move to the summary of the testing results that you performed. Do you believe that Ethan is a highly intelligent person?
I do.
Do you believe that he suffers from debilitating anxiety?
I do.
Do you believe that he is and was severely depressed?
I do.
Do you believe that he has features of obsessive compulsive disorder?
I do.
were you able to determine that he was failing at school when, as you stated, he shouldn't have been?
I did.
And what exactly is your diagnosis for Ethan Crumbley?
So major depressive disorder, in addition to psychosis, as evidenced by his verbalizing of hearing voices and seeing things. And by the way, about 12.5% of people with major depression experience major depression with psychosis.
Okay, I have one problem with that, and that is that someone else that is a psychologist or whatever, might have been his psychiatrist that he's seeing, he never reacts, and he's never seen reacting to an unseen stimuli, internal or external. So he's not actually, he's claiming he has these voices and things are telling him what to do, but he's never seen reacting to it like you would see someone that typically is having a psychotic episode. The best way to most obvious thing is someone that's schizophrenic. If they're here having, auditory or visual hallucinations, you literally see them physically reacting to it. And there's nothing there. He is never seen doing that. I think that he's an average smart kid who knows that what he's thinking is not right. So he's talking about, it's his voice is telling me to do that. Or he's saying like his own thoughts are voices, because you have a thought in your head, that's your brain or your consciousness or subconsciousness. I think that's what it is. And this is, again, shifting the focus, shifting the blame when the blame is clearly on him. He's not mentally ill to the point where he is incompetent. And that is clear because he was found competent to stand trial. So I think trying to say that this is why he did what he did is completely irrelevant and just bad.
You have now had an opportunity after turning
Or
in
she's
your
trying to save her
report
client,
review
so I
the
kinda
records
get
from
it.
Dr. Kadir. She is the physician from the Easter Seals. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Would you agree with me that you have similar findings, but not exactly the same?
That is correct.
Do you have an explanation for that?
Yeah, that is not unusual. Diagnosing mental illness is not an exact science, so you go based on symptoms. So Dr. Kadir, based on my review of her notation, diagnosed him with, I think, major depressive disorder and I think an adjustment disorder going on
With anxiety.
With anxiety, which is not unusual. But I believe as she continues, if she continues to treat him, once he has the depression and anxiety under control, if he's still verbalizing, hearing voices, and seeing things, then she may add that diagnosis. So it's not inconsistent.
Add the diagnosis of psychosis or something else?
Correct.
Of psychosis. Okay. So you have told us from your results that Ethan
The only time
is
you ever
of
said he
average,
saw
if
things
not
was in
above
his
average
house.
intelligence, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So shouldn't he have known better? Shouldn't he have not done this because he's a smart kid?
So unfortunately, intelligence, and this is critical, intelligence does not protect someone from mental illness. So being very intelligent doesn't mean that you cannot be mentally ill.
Do you have any real world examples?
I do. Robin Williams, very intelligent Hollywood actor, but he was mentally ill. How do I know that? Well, he killed himself. He committed suicide. Twitch.
Apples to oranges.
Very talented man on Ellen DeGeneres' show. Extremely talented. I actually watched a video of him the day before he killed himself. He was dancing with his wife and daughter, and then the next day he drove to a hotel and killed.
this is completely irrelevant and off topic. Ethan Crumbley was never, ever suicidal. He never planned on suicide by cop. He never planned on, unaliving himself. His plan was to turn himself in. He wanted to be caught. He wanted to be seen as the most prolific school shooter in Michigan. He talked about that in his diaries or his journals. So bringing up two people that were relatively famous that unalive themselves has absolutely nothing to do with Ethan Crumbley. I'm sorry. This is, again, just shifting the blame.
To kill himself. Mental illness is real.
Were you able to watch any videos that were provided to you from body cam footage of Ethan at the jail?
I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to play what is in my exhibits as S body cam jail footage. There are a few videos, but we have shortened them. This is sound, so I don't know if we can have your staff just make sure the sound is working. Perfect.
God, please, God, sorry, God. Why didn't you save her? Why didn't you save her? Why didn't you save her, God?
Move to the next one.
You don't stop it. Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? I know you stopped it. Please stop 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 it. Why did you stop it, God? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it, God? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? You let it happen. Why? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, please, God. I'm sorry. Please, God. I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, God. Stop it. You couldn't stop it, God, but you didn't stop it. And now I continue. It's always stop it. God, stop it, please. Stop it, God. Stop it. Stop, God, God, stop.
Stop pushing forward.
Stop, God, stop, please, God. Oh, stop. 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 God, stop. God, stop it. Please. I did stop it. I did stop it. Stop it.
Right foot back.
I did stop it. You didn't 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 stop it.
Let's lay back. Let's lay back.
It's stop it, God. Please stop it. You didn't 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 stop it. You don't stop it. You don't stop it. You didn't stop it. Oh God, you didn't stop it. Please tell me. Oh yeah. No, you didn't stop it. You didn't stop it. You didn't stop it. You didn't stop Just ask. All right. Yeah. On count three, you're gonna sit down. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead, tell me what. You call. Time. Allow the everything. You don't stop it. Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? Why don't you stop it? Please stop it. 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 Why did you stop it? God, why? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it, God? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? You let it out. Me.
All right. Doctor, what did we just witness?
So we witnessed a child in the throes of psychosis. But we just witnessed someone who's saying, God, why didn't you stop it? And that's exactly how psychosis works. You engage in an action and somehow you don't understand the outcome of the consequences. He's having a panic attack and a break with reality.
We also hear him saying you could have saved her.
That is correct.
In any part of that video, do you see Ethan being violent?
No, ma'am.
Are mental health issues perfect? I mean, he's obviously been on medication now for a period of time, and things like this obviously can still happen. What is your explanation to that?
So medications are not an exact science. There's different levels of titration. There are times when some medications work, and there are times when they don't always work, just like in the physical realm.
I want to move on to part 5. So you were able to look at the events leading up to the shooting, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Did Ethan disclose to you a situation where he actually brought casings to school and displayed them on his desk?
He did.
Can you explain that?
Certainly, he indicated to me that he brought one live round, and actually in my review of the records and with the detectives that interviewed some of the students, one of the students did confirm that Ethan showed him a live round and shell casings. So I have no reasons to doubt what he said, that he placed some shell casings on the desk in his class. And the teacher walked by, didn't name the teacher, and I said to him multiple times, "Are you sure?" And he said yes.
You were made aware and you were able to see some interviews about the events of November 30th in the counseling office, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And it was your understanding that he was caught looking at websites dealing with ammunition?
That is correct.
Okay. Were you able to look at the actual school assignment that was the cause of him being taken to the office that morning, where he wrote certain things and drew certain things?
That is correct.
Were you also able to discuss with Ethan the video that the court has been shown that was filmed the night before?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've had an opportunity to review that video?
I have.
Can you explain that video or give it some context?
So this was a night before the shooting when Ethan recorded himself, appeared to have been using a cell phone in terms of what he was planning to do the following day. And doing certain parts of the video, he made references to demons. And then in the video, he said, "I am the demon." It just indicates the fragmentation in his head in terms of what was happening.
And what was your understanding about why he was outside at that point in time? What did he tell you had gone on in the home leading up to him being outside?
I think his parents had locked him out of the house, and they had taken some money from him.
And was that in relation to grades?
Yes, because he was failing some of his classes.
And how did he feel about that?
Terrible, in terms of how they were treating him.
The video that the court has viewed, and I know you have viewed, it seems just like a rambling of thoughts.
That is correct.
Okay.
Just sort of scrambled thoughts.
And do you believe that that is part of what mental illness can do to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about the actual day of the shooting. Did Ethan ever tell you if he had been asked if he had a gun by any school professionals or the parents that day at school?
No.
And is it your understanding from speaking to Ethan that he was allowed to stay in school that day?
Yes, he was allowed to stay in school.
And can you explain the situation involving his backpack or how he explained it to you?
So this is how he explained it to me after he was called down to the office. He left his backpack in the classroom. And then he indicated that, I think it was Ejak. I could be butchering his name. I do apologize for that. Went to retrieve his backpack. And Ethan said, for the first time in his life, he felt relieved. He said he just knew that the sheriffs were going to burst into the office and arrest him because there was no way, after all that they saw, that they were not going to search that backpack. In fact,
It is hard to watch. It's very frustrating to watch.
he said one of the Hispanic students was suspected of using drugs. And he remembered them searching that kid's locker. And he felt fairly sure that they were going to search his backpack. When Ejak brought the backpack into the office, he made a comment. He said, "This is heavy. What do you have in here? Bricks?" And then Ethan said, all he had to do was just unzip that backpack, but he didn't.
So the best of your knowledge, after speaking with Ethan and reviewing all of the records, the backpack was not searched, correct?
It was not searched.
So obviously at that point, Ethan had the opportunity to volunteer the information that he had a weapon in his bag. Would you agree with me?
That is correct.
Can you explain why you believe that did not happen?
He was in a state of ambivalence. Do I tell? Do I not tell? Do I do this? Do I not do this? What is going to happen if I tell? So that's the state of flux that he was
So I want to kind of put it all together for the court. So you've told us about a complex childhood full of trauma, correct?
That is correct.
Violence in the home,
That is correct.
mental illness,
That is correct.
a lack of resources, no one's getting him the counseling that he needs,
That is correct.
neglect,
That is correct.
access to weapons,
That is correct.
in a school system with not enough counselors.
That
And
is
where did
correct.
that lead us?
Tragedy.
I want to move on to part 6. I know you've touched on quite a bit of this already. There's been testimony and there's been some argument about Ethan looking up or talking about going to prison. Is it normal that a 15-year-old would just be okay with the fact that he's going to do something that lands him in prison?
So teenagers go through a phase that is called personal failing. And if I may give you an example.
Sure.
A teenager may be driving 100 yards away, the light is about to turn red. They think that they can magically beat that red light and nothing bad is going to happen to them. It's because their brain, their prefrontal cortex, this is the brain supervisor, is not fully developed. Just biologically and physiologically, the human brain, the prefrontal cortex, is not developed until about age 24 or 25. In Ethan's case, he has what is called arrested development.
Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. So chronologically, he may have been 15 at the time, but given the high levels of stress and complex trauma, his age was much younger than his chronological age.
You've been able to see through the text messages and actually in your interviews with Ethan, he reported that he was not sleeping and he was not eating. How does that tie into mental illness?
So the brain consumes about 20 to 30% of the calories that we consume. So whatever we consume, the brain consumes about 20 to 30% of that. So sleep deprivation and lack of appropriate nutrition greatly impact the body. Our bodies were not meant to be in a state of high anxiety perpetually.
You've also been able to take a look at the Google searches that he was doing, and a lot of them are looking kind of for self-diagnosis, looking up what is depression. Do I have ADHD? Do I have obsessive compulsive disorder? What do you make of that?
So here is a child who was just trying to make sense of his inner world. He couldn't get help from his parents, from the home system. Couldn't get help from the school system. He couldn't get to a doctor. He couldn't get to a counselor. So his last resort was to try to figure out what's happening to me. Is this normal? Am I depressed? Am I anxious? Am I a sociopath? Who am I? He's trying to make sense of what's going on within him.
You've also been shown a number of searches that were done on a particular website where very violent videos, actual murders, actual shootings are categorized and people can view them. What is your understanding of what that does, especially to an adolescent's brain?
So during adolescence, the person's brain is still in the formative stage. The neurons are still trying to connect. And if one spends an inordinate amount of time ingesting that type of content without supervision, before long, it's natural to lose sight of what is real and what is not real.
Now, you've been made aware that there was a situation at the jail with a password and a tablet, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And can you explain what you believe to have happened in this situation?
Certainly. So Ethan was given a tablet, and because he's a fairly intelligent person, he was able to figure out the password and was able to go on the internet and use his tablet. And what he indicated to me is that although he had the urge to go to the live bore site, he was able to restrain himself, which he's pretty proud of. 2 weeks, just did not go to the site, but he eventually went there.
And what does that, can you give that a context? What does that mean to you? Is he regressing? What, can you give an explanation to that?
So when you make a comparison of what he was doing prior, he was ingesting that content constantly, every day, hours and hours at a time. And in my mind, it shows progress, not perfection, but progress.
No one said he was watching it for hours and hours and hours at a time. That's facts, not
Were you
evidence.
able to view the videos of Ethan killing baby birds?
I did.
Can you discuss the significance of that and what you think and how you think it fits into this case and his diagnosis?
Absolutely. I observed Ethan torturing baby birds. He wanted them to feel the pain that he was feeling inside. And I observed his persona. He was actually speaking to them in a different tone of voice, almost as a parent talking to a child. It's just a reflection of his mental impairment.
What about, he talks about a desire to kill, or he wants to find another set of baby birds so that he can kill them. Can you explain that?
It sort of lines up with my testing of his brain. I indicated that his obsessive compulsive scales, I think his score was 801, indicating that this part of the brain, this cingulate gyrus, is on fire, meaning that it's hard to turn it off, and without appropriate intervention, without treatment and medications, that part of the brain is stopped on.
What about the fact that when the police come in, Ethan surrenders, and then in the police car acts normal? I mean, he's not talking to voices, he's not flailing about. Can you explain that?
Certainly, it's a phase called tension reduction. So tension is something that is built up. Anxiety, obsession, anxiety, obsession. I guess a good analogy is to think in terms of like a pressure cooker. It's on the stove and it's boiling, and there's tension building up in there. And the one way for that tension to go away is when you release that knob, the tension goes out and you revert to equilibrium. So tension reduction cycle.
So is your explanation then, once he carried out this plan that he was so fixated on, he had that sense of reduction or accomplishment?
Absolutely. It's analogous to what we just witnessed. So the person in the videos is the same person in the courtroom. There's no difference. It is the same person.
I want to talk about the report that you authored. Obviously, in giving the history that you did, you've been doing these regular types of analysis outside of the courtroom for many years. You would agree with me?
That is correct.
So how is it that you came to start doing the work that you're doing now for Miller hearings?
We were so in, I think it was around 2019, an attorney reached out to me and asked me if I would do one of the Miller hearings.
Mhm.
And I was fairly confident in my ability as a psychologist, in my ability to clinically interview someone, in my ability to test someone. But in terms of crafting a legal report, I was a neophyte. It was not my area of expertise. And so I reached out to the attorney and said that if I'm to do this report, I'm going to need you to reach out to your sources, obtain copies of their report, make sure you get their permission, because I plan to use the rubric and extract some of the legal language in my report. And that is 2019 to 25 clients ago. And that is the exact format that I've been using.
And that's what you did in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to form an opinion whether or not Ethan Crumbley was mentally ill on November 30th of 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
He has major depressive disorder with psychosis, anxiety, and features of obsessive compulsive disorder. He is mentally ill.
And in all of the testing that you did and the interviews, do you believe that there is the possibility of rehabilitation?
I do.
And can you explain that?
Certainly. As I indicated, I've worked in the field of brain injury for 25 years. I take pride in my work. I've treated people with stroke, CVA.
Forgot to unmute myself. Sorry. The judge already said it's not facts, not an evidence of him having a brain injury, and he keeps talking about that. And it's never been established that he has a brain injury, ever. So why they are letting him talk about this is beyond me, and I don't know. I don't understand why they're doing it, though.
I've treated people with a not sick brain injury.
I also have a TBI. So,
and along with my team, we've been able to rehabilitate people. A number of my clients have had issues with the law, and through psychotherapy,
not killing people, though,
and support, they've made progress. Additionally, and this is important, in neuroscience, there is something called neuroplasticity. And that is the ability of the brain to create new pathways, to generate new neurons. You see this in stroke victims. It's a stroke on the left-hand side, it's right-hand side neglect. But those are the people that I've worked with and taught them how to speak again and how to walk again and how to function. So absolutely yes.
So people with mental illness, especially ones that do something, extremely serious that leads them down a path that they find themselves in prison. I know Dr. Keating touched on this a little bit, but you believe that, especially based on Ethan's age, that his brain can rewire and he can stop the behaviors that he was exhibiting previously. Is that correct?
That is correct. Ethan's brain is still maturing, and his brain probably will not reach full maturity for another 10 years.
Are the clinical opinions in your report based solely on the testing and your interaction with Ethan Crumbley that you yourself performed?
So my conclusions are based on my clinical interview of Ethan Crumbley and are based on the results from my testing.
I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cross.
Your Honor, the doctor's actually testified to a whole lot of things that are not in his report. And could we take a short break before cross-examination?
Finally.
We'll go ahead and
Okay.
take about a 10-minute break. Deputies, if you could, go ahead and take the defendant back downstairs. To those in the gallery, please be seated until the defendant has.
I'm glad that he finally said something about the whole he's testifying to stuff that's not in evidence. Dog, stop. This is a little bit longer than 10 minutes.
Not that long.
Thank you. All may be seated.
Your Honor, calling people versus Ethan Crumbley. Case
I'm gonna have to
279,
probably cut into
506
this in about
FZ.
30 minutes, depending.
Karen McDonald on behalf of the people.
Thank you, Mark Case, on behalf of people.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. David Williams on behalf of the people.
Paul Michelle Lofton on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Amy Cobb on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Deborah H. McKelvey on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Thank you. You all may be seated. And good morning again. Dr. King, if he's still in the courtroom. Dr. King, you may retake the stand, sir. Sir, you may be seated. You are still under oath. Thank you. People cross.
Good morning, Dr. King.
Good morning, sir.
Dr. King, you're here because your job is to help the defense establish mitigating factors for this defendant, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're familiar with the Miller factors.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in fact, you note that on the first page of your report, the defendant was referred to you for an evaluation focused particularly on the sentencing factors outlined in Miller versus Alabama, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you say that the Miller factors and mental illness, you say, supports a sentence of other than life without parole, true?
Yes, sir.
You know that the Miller factors are incorporated into Michigan law. Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And can you tell us what the 5 factors are?
So, immaturity, age, person has to be younger than 18, impetuosity, transient recklessness, and ability to extricate oneself from a dysfunctional family.
Anything else, doctor?
I probably missed a couple. I didn't memorize them.
Okay, so doctor, in fact, under the law, there are 5 factors. First is chronological age, hallmark features among them, immaturity, impetuosity, failure to appreciate risks and consequences. Does that sound right?
That's about right.
So most of what you described goes to that first factor. The second is the juvenile's family and home environment. And you talked about that, the inability to overcome his circumstances, right?
Yes, sir.
There are 3 other factors: the circumstance of the homicide offense, the incompetencies of youth, which affect how the juvenile might have been charged or convicted of a lesser crime, and the possibility of rehabilitation, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Doctor, when were you retained in this case?
I think it was contacted on or around, and my timeline could be off. I want to say in November. It was just around Thanksgiving of 22, I believe. Again, my timeline could be off.
And you were provided some materials to review,
Yes, sir.
and then you interviewed the defendant.
I did.
Over how many sessions?
I believe over 6 sessions.
And can you tell us when those were?
So I did not memorize the date. I think the first time I met the defendant would have been around January 4th or 5th. I think that is the first time I interviewed him. I interviewed him twice virtually, and maybe 3 or 4 times after. The last time I interviewed him was probably July, I think 10th or 11th. I don't have the access to my calendar, so I didn't memorize those dates.
Okay, Doctor, what do you have with you today? Before you move on, the first meeting you said that was on January 4th or January 5th, was that of 2023?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And then your last meeting, of course, would have been in 2023 as well, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Doctor, what do you have with you today?
I have my PowerPoint.
For at least a minute, then let it cool. Boiled or bottled water should be used in drinking, making ice, washing dishes, and preparing
Okay.
food.
Hold on.
Try beach.
That's popular.
Box 2
Can you have
Detroit
your
messed
report
up.
in front of you.
I do.
And so we're clear that's your report dated June 16th, 2023. And
Sorry
you
about
signed
that.
for
That's Box 2
69,
Detroit.
correct?
I do.
All right.
They apparently
Turn
had
to
a
page
boil
3.
advisory.
Doctor, does that help refresh your recollection regarding any of the dates that you interviewed the defendant?
I do.
Okay, so was your first meeting with him on December 15th of 2022?
That is correct.
And you conducted a structured interview on January 5th, 2023?
That is correct.
And you did an evaluation of competency to stand trial on January 11th of 2023?
That is correct.
Okay, and as to the other 3 dates, you're not able to give us those today?
Yes, that is correct.
And doctor, you did some testing and then you did some research yourself, correct?
That is correct.
Doctor, in the timeline that was in the presentation that was put up on the screen, it didn't include the dates of your reports. You prepared 2 reports, correct?
I prepared an initial report because if my memory serves me correctly, this hearing was supposed to have been held, I think, early in May.
May 1st.
May 1st. And then I was told that there was an adjournment, and so here we are today.
Right. Okay. So, but in your timeline, it didn't include the dates of the reports. And in fact, the first report came partway through that timeline. Would you agree? And then the last report came in June.
That sounds about right, sir.
So, doctor, on page 3 of your report, again, we're talking about your June report. You refer to it on page 2 as a complete list of records relied on and reviewed, correct?
What page is that?
On page 2, you reference, it's in the first paragraph, partway down, a complete list of records reviewed and relied on is listed beginning on page 3 of this report.
I see that.
Okay. And then you see on page 3 of your report, you list a number of things, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Dr. King, you testified to a number of things on direct that don't appear in that list. Can you tell us what those are? What other things that aren't on this list you reviewed and considered?
So, for instance, Dr. Kadir's report from Easter Seals, which is comprised of 1,310 pages. I believe I only got those, I think, last week.
Okay.
Ms. Lofton, of course, has sent me updated information. I apologize, I've not been able to memorize information. We're talking about voluminous pages of information.
Okay, so what I want to know about, doctor, is things that you had at the time of your June 16th report that you did not list. So, for example, you said in your direct testimony that you interviewed a neighbor. You recall testifying to that?
Yes,
And that's not listed in your source of information, is it?
that is not listed here. I do not see it here.
Okay, in fact, when did you conduct that interview?
Probably it was about, I think about 2 months ago, and again, my timeline could be off. I don't have my calendar in front of me, sir, so I'm not able to give you that exact date.
Doctor, you made no reference to that in your report, did you?
It's not in my sources of available information.
Is it referenced anywhere in your report?
I don't see the reference here, sir.
Okay, but I'm not, there are a bunch of things you referenced that aren't listed in your sources, and we'll talk about that. What I'm asking you is, did you make reference to your interview with the neighbor anywhere in your report? Is there any way I would have known that about that before today?
Yes, so can I explain?
Please.
So you have, sir, a copy of my PowerPoint?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay, I apologize for that.
So it's not mentioned in your report. Did you document that interview with the neighbor in any way?
I did.
And do you have that documentation with you today?
It's not in my report, sir.
Okay, thank you. Do you have documentation of that anywhere? Do you have notes? Did you write a short report? Did you report that to council? Do you have anything that reflects your interview with the neighbor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have that with you today?
I do not.
You also referenced text messages between the parents, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's not listed in your source of information either, is it?
It is not listed.
Okay. And you don't reference that in the report, do you?
That is correct.
Okay. Doctor, you testified about reviewing the defendant's internet searches, correct?
That is correct.
And in fact, you mentioned something about researching something about a dog, right? About burying the dog.
That is correct.
Okay. You talked about he's got to go out to the shed and bury the dog, right?
That is correct, sir.
And he was researching how to do that.
That is correct.
And that's the same shed where he tortured the baby birds, correct?
I don't know that to be a fact, but if you say that is the case, I don't know that to be a fact.
So, doctor, you have something that no one else in this courtroom had. You had access to all the information you wanted, and you got to interview the defendant. Did you not ask the defendant about where that torture took place?
The torture of,
The birds.
I think he said it took place in the shed. I don't know if there's multiple sheds. I've never been to the home, sir, so I honestly don't know.
So, doctor, I just asked you about the torture, and then you said the torture of what? Are you aware of torture of anything other than birds?
I just wanted to have clarification from you, sir, just before I answer the question.
That's fine. Are you aware of any other torture committed by the defendant?
Besides the birds, I don't think so. Or at least I don't recall of any other.
Doctor, you also mentioned that you reviewed text messages over a period of months between the defendant and his friend B. Is that right? Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
In your report, doctor, you reference a subset of those, right?
Do you have a page for me?
So, doctor, you can do two things. One is, why don't we look at page 3, the 5th bullet point up from the bottom, and you list a series of dates. Text messages obtained by Paulette Lofton between the defendant and his friend B dated April 5th, 2021 to April 7th of 2021, right?
Okay.
But you're telling the court you, in fact, reviewed a lot more text than that. You just don't reference them in your sources, correct?
That is true.
Okay. And then, doctor, on pages 8 through 22, through 21, you include a series of text messages. You know about how many those are?
How many text messages?
Yeah, that you include in your report.
Oh.
If I say roughly 200, I don't need an exact number. Does that sound about right?
I would not disagree with you.
Okay. And Doctor, you'd agree with me, those text messages that you specifically paste into your report are all from one day, April 5th of 2021.
As far as I can see, sir, yes.
Doctor, you looked at some emails, and then you looked at something, assignment from Ms. Kubina that you referenced. Those also are not listed in your source of information, are they?
They're not.
But you did review them and consider those.
I did.
And then Dr. Aniker's report is listed in your sources, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And you reviewed that entire report, correct?
The report of Dr. Aniker?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you considered that in your analysis. It was part of your review and your conclusion. Is that correct?
I did.
So, Doctor, we talked about the text message you reviewed. You also reviewed some videos, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what videos did you review?
I reviewed the videos of the actual shooting. I reviewed the videos of the bird and the video of Ethan taking a fall in the diner, and I believe 4 or 5 other videos from the Oakland County Jail.
Okay, and Doctor, do you also review the video that the defendant took the night before the shooting?
Yes, I did.
Doctor, regarding the diner video, when I watch it, it doesn't seem you can see in the video whether the defendant hits his head or not. Were you able to see that in the video, or did you get that from the defendant?
Can you rephrase that question, please, sir?
When I watched the video from the diner, I actually didn't see the defendant hit his head. Maybe I missed it. But are you saying you can see that in the video, or that that's what the defendant told you?
I'm wondering if you missed it, sir, because based on my review of it, that is what appeared to have happened, and he was helped up, and then he fell again and had to be helped up. That's how I saw it.
You prepared. We talked about 2 reports, Doctor, and the first report is dated January 27th of 20.
We watched the video. Actually, I played it a couple times. I'm not sure that we saw him actually hit his head. We saw him go down, and we heard his body connecting with what I'm assuming was the metal, like, prep tables or whatever is in the back of the restaurant there. But I'm not entirely sure that we actually saw him hit his head. We saw another worker help him up, and it seemed like maybe he was struggling to stand. But I don't think we actually saw him hit his head, but we definitely heard it, because it was, when I remember hearing it, and it was like, that was like that was some impact. That sounded like it hurt bad. But I don't think we actually saw him hit his head.
2023. You know, may I approach, Runner?
Yes.
Okay. You know what?
Showing what's been marked as people's proposed exhibit 63.
Okay. I am going to stop the stream here. I have some stuff that I have to do. I have an appointment that I need to leave for. So tomorrow, let's say 10 a.m. We're going to go an hour earlier, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That way we have some time. I do have another appointment tomorrow afternoon, so it looks like we might have for the rest of the week. We'll get through as much as we can get through tomorrow. Thank you, Chi Magwitch. Thank you for watching and joining me. Again, this is Michigan Crime Time, and this is the Ethan Crumbley, who is the Oxford School shooter, his Miller hearing, Day 3, Part 1. We will pick up tomorrow. Again, Chi Magwitch, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow.